welcome to the July 5th, 2011 meeting of the Glendale Housing Authority. May we have a roll call, please?
Authority members: Friedman.
Here.
Manukian.
Here.
Mincy.
Here.
Najarian.
Here.
Brazian.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
Chair Quintero.
Here. And we have your report.
The agenda for the July 5th, 2011 regular meeting of the Glendale Housing Authority was posted on Thursday, June 30th, 2011 on the bulletin board outside City Hall. For this meeting, there are no minutes for approval. Next item is oral communications. No cards were submitted.
I don't have any cards. What's next?
On the business agenda at 6A is Director of Community Development regarding request for additional information regarding professional services agreement change orders related to 2011-12 housing program budget in support of affordable housing activities. At 6A1 is a motion to approve a change order in a professional services agreement with Kane, Balmer, and Berkman, C104942, to extend the contract term for approximately 1 year to end June 30th, 2012. At 6A2 is a motion to approve a change order to the professional services agreement with Kaiser Marston, C104814, in the amount of $43,500 for a new not-to-exceed contract total of $93,500, and to extend the contract term for approximately 2 years to the end of June 30th, 2013.
Starbird.
Yes, very quickly, Mr. Chair, members of the agency. Last week, the governor did sign the state budget bill and the various trailer bills associated with that, including the bills that would essentially eliminate redevelopment and then give an option for buying your way back into existence. With that signing, we had to look a little bit at process relative to actions taken by either the redevelopment agency or housing authority for the use of redevelopment funds during this period of time before the city either opts in or the action is stayed by a court action. With that, let me turn to Mr. Garcia to discuss that as it relates to this item before you take the matter up. Michael?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Housing Authority. Given the legislature's action and the governor's approval to suspend redevelopment activities, we believe that the redevelopment agency is prevented at this point from entering into any new agreements, and we believe that given the legislative intent of this bill was to preserve as many of the redevelopment assets as possible, that the Housing Authority as well may be prevented from what's called entering into contracts. We do believe that the Housing Authority can authorize the Executive Director to execute these change orders or agreements if the Housing Authority so chooses, but that authority to execute those contracts would have to be subject to the City Council's approval of the so-called opt-in ordinance, which is called the Alternative Voluntary Redevelopment Program. Those actions are coming before the council next week for consideration, and if there was an ordinance to be adopted, that would occur on the 19th. So if the council, if the Housing Authority is inclined to approve these two contracts, or one or both of them, we've provided revised motions for you, which would authorize Mr. Starbird to execute those agreements upon the council's approval or adoption of the opt-in ordinance, which wouldn't occur until the 19th. So that's kind of where we are procedurally, and you can go forward based on that.
I have a question. In terms of, there's no question that we are going to be able to proceed with the Mercy housing project. Is that correct? Since
we're looking at that as well. That's an issue because initially one of the sources of funds may have been the set-aside. We're looking at that and whether there's some additional funds from another source that can be used, or if we recommend the same procedures we're doing here today, which is to authorize Mr. Starbird to execute those agreements upon the Council's adoption of the alternative program.
Okay. Mr. Weaver.
Starbird, we're CRA or the state, we're going after a stay of the governor signing the bills, correct? And hopefully a lawsuit. If we go ahead and act on the governor's plan, which is multi-million dollars, are we caught, or does that just fall by the wayside if we get a stay?
I turn to our city attorney on that, Michael.
Mr. Weaver, I think that we're sort of waiting to get information on when the league and the CRA are going to be filing their lawsuit. we anticipate by the time we're before you on the 19th for the voluntary program, we'll have some knowledge whether or not they got to stay. We anticipate they'll go in soon, and we'll have some more information by the time we're here before you on the 19th.
I'd hate to vote to give him money that he doesn't have authority under the Constitution
No,
to take from us.
I might add that the last CRA board meeting, we were informed that they expected to file a motion for a stay within 2 or 3 days of the governor signing the legislation. That was Thursday, Friday. So I would expect Wednesday or Thursday. Now, we had a holiday week, so that would mean Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I would expect the attorneys are probably heading to court. We do have a special CRA board meeting on Friday, and so we'll learn more about the actions that have been taken since the governor's signature.
As long as we keep the options open.
Yeah.
What else?
That's it with respect to the procedural. I think Mr. Starber and Mr. Zovak.
Right, and we have brought to you in the staff report, there was a request for more detail on the work that has been performed and would be performed under the contract. We've expanded the staff report to include that. Peter Zovak is here if you have any questions.
Only if we have questions.
Any questions?
I have a question. If this is authorized and the council later accepts that, will Marston then be also working on our individual projects? Because now that you said they'd been mainly the public projects, larger.
Sorry, Mr. Mitzi, can you repeat the question?
Didn't you say originally that this one firm was doing our low-income housing thing, and then Marston was working more with the bigger projects?
Commercial projects.
Not
Commercial.
Marston was working more on the commercial project.
Right, commercial project. I'm asking,
Housing projects.
would they now also be assisting us with some of our low-income projects?
Kaiser Marston does assist us with our low-income projects to a smaller degree than our other economic consultant, Tierra West Advisors. At the same time, they're assisting the housing division. They also assist the redevelopment division with the 80% money in the commercial projects at a much larger level. Different personnel and different staff as well work on their side as opposed to our side.
I know they've worked with us along a lot of years.
They have over the period of the Housing Authority, yes.
Thank you.
Manukian.
So the proposal at this point is based on the information that is in the report, not to allocate any new funding, but to use the funding that is still available from last year's budget of $60,000 for KBB. Is that correct?
Correct. That's the revised motion for Kane, Balmer, and Berkman. If you recall, the authority took action and actually took a vote last week on a previous motion with KBB, which was to execute a contract amendment, extend out the time, and add new funding to the project. The second time around, since action was taken and the project or the motion was not approved, the revised motion would be to allow the contract to be amended, extending it out for 1 year, but add no new funding to the contract. Just allow the carryover to do just that, to carry over into the new contract term.
Just $60,000 carryover. Right. And when I rewatched the Housing Authority meeting for last week, it was brought back. This item was brought back at the request of the city attorney, and to have it come back for a specific project, not for everything. Is that what is being proposed?
What we did in the report, we identified the projects that Kane, Balmer, and Berkman is currently working on. That would be the Door Gardens project. That would be the Mercy Housing project.
So these two projects.
It would be continuing and completing the work on those two projects, as well as some policy issues that they're working on, and we listed those out in the report as well. A couple of issues. They've been the lead agency or lead group working on the issues of the state's elimination of redevelopment. So that would continue.
But why would the work that is going to be relating to the elimination of the redevelopment agency, why is it being charged out of the Housing Authority funds? Shouldn't it be under redevelopment agency action?
It's the.
If I may, Mr. Manukian, actually it comes out of both. It's just that we've We've been taking a holistic view of that, both with our in-house staff, Ms. Van Meiden and me, and then using Ms. Rhodes from Kane Balmer to assist us on certain actions related to that. And since the housing set-aside is impacted, we've been using it. She doesn't take the lead on that. It's really coming from our office, but we do use her to get the insight of what other agencies are doing with respect to these policy issues.
I just want to make sure that there is no new projects and there's no new funds being allocated to this contract without the proper authority authorizing it. So, right? Okay.
That's correct.
Mr. Najarian.
We just heard that the Mercy project may or may not be permitted to be funding, depending if you can make a allocation or a segregation of the funds between home and the tax increment. Can you just tell us, when he said, is Mercy still on? You
Well,
said,
I think
we have to
there's
see.
two options. One is to approve it with the condition that it won't be effective until the council, unless and until the council's adopted an ordinance, or staff's going to see if they can find some other source of funds to pay for it so that we don't have to wait for that additional time. So it's not like it can't get funded out of set-aside. It's just it may take a little bit longer to be funded out of set-aside if we wait till the opt-in ordinance.
We're anticipating by the 19th.
Correct.
Again, anticipating our recommendation and then anticipating that the Housing Authority, Redevelopment Agency, City Council would concur that we should have an urgency ordinance in place by the 19th that will opt into the Buy Your Way Back to Life plan that the governor and legislature have given to us. Now, there's been a question of can you do that earlier in the time frame that the state has set in legislation? And the consensus among attorneys, both ours as well as redevelopment attorneys, is you can. There's nothing in the legislation prohibiting that.
My only thought is that as this case goes to the courts and the whole issue of, it seems to me that if the redevelopment agencies are going to object to the elimination of the redevelopment and requesting a stay, I think it's very likely that a stay would be put on the entire process and not permit one part of the legislation eliminating redevelopment to go forward and put a stay on the rest. So I think it may be, assuming that the provisions are stayed, I think it may be wishful thinking that we'll be able to opt in a few weeks' time.
If it is stayed, we won't need to
in either case,
opt
you'd
in.
be covered. If it's stayed, you won't need necessarily to opt in, but the fact that maybe you would have already opted in shouldn't put you at a disadvantage. So it's kind of a belts and suspenders approach to making sure you can still operate.
I don't overlook the possibility that a judge may just freeze everything as is and prevent the the state is certainly going to say, but look, Judge, while you're determining this, all these agencies are spending all their money and making all these commitments. In the end, we're going to have nothing anyway. So don't overlook the possibility that the judge might just say, everyone freeze as is, don't do anything. So, and my point is, which brings me back to the issue of the funding that we're setting aside for Mercy, as well as this is the first I've heard that they're doing work with regard to the elimination of redevelopment agencies. Is that what I understood? That we're paying them to take an advocacy role?
No. This was just to assist our office as we were going. Since we started in January, we've used them as a sounding board for ideas. They've given us ideas as far as the steps that we need to take. It's been primarily Jillian and me doing the work on the procedural steps we've been doing. When we took actions in January and when we came back to you in March, we took those different actions related to the redevelopment agency and the housing authority to preserve as much of the assets as we could legally. But we did use them in that regard. And I got to say, it was useful.
How much, to what extent have we used them in that regard? Is it just a few hours, or is it a significant amount of billing?
It's more than a few hours, but I wouldn't call it a significant amount of billing. Because, again, most of the actual legwork came from our office working with staff.
Right. This is all what-if stuff. This is all speculation and trying to think strategy and all that. My point is I just want to save as much money as we can. And I'm a little bit reluctant, even with the revised ordinance, to say, here you go, KBB, we're not going to give you new money, but here's $52,000. Being an attorney, I know that that's quite an invitation to work to the full extent to benefit your client. Let's put it that way. If there's research to be done, it'll be thorough and complete research. If there's documents to be prepared, it'll be thorough and complete documents. I want to break in the event that we may not have funds, that every $1,000 that we can save could go to preserve or to advance the core of our duties here as a housing authority. $52,000 could be a significant amount. So I'd like to give a much smaller amount to KBB, and if they need to come back during this course of uncertainty, maybe on a month-by-month basis, rather than give them a 52. They used $8,000 in the month of June. I mean, if we're going to give them $20,000, that maybe will cover a few months, then come back to us to refill the kitty and see where we're going. But I'm very reluctant just to say, here's $52,000. It'll be gone. I know there's good attorneys out there, and they will do their very best to represent their clients. And I think we need to, in this, keeping in line with our efforts in cutting costs and expenses in every single one of our departments and every single one of our contractors, I'd like to reduce that $52,000 amount to something in 50% of that.
Anyone else?
I have a question.
Yes.
What is going to happen after 1 year? Are we going to just approve a change order in 2012 in case?
The way it's worded in the staff report is that we would continue utilizing KBB on these select projects outlined in the report, and then at the same time, community development and city attorney staff will be looking at the issue of providing future legal services for new projects and new policy issues, and coming back with a decision and a recommendation on how to provide that in the future.
Okay, Mr. Najarian had an idea. Is there support for that concept?
Well, I have a question, which is what effect would that have on their ability to do the work that we need to have done on Mercy and on any other projects? Would that jeopardize the Mercy project? Because that's my number one priority, is to make sure that that project has every chance of moving forward.
There's a slight possibility that it could, if we were bumping up against some finalization that we needed to make on any of the agreements, and then at the same time bumping up against a fiscal impact in terms of not having enough funding. There may be a situation like that could occur.
You see it
There's
coming?
likely, I don't know. I think it's important to note, though, that KBB, in terms of their recently expired contract, did leave money in the account for a carryover, so they didn't necessarily utilize all of that funding in that situation. As we state in the report, approximately $52,000 is carrying over.
And if I can, we don't leave it up to them to decide if they're going to use their money. We use what we think we need. That's why, at the end of the day, it's not up to KBB whether they expend the budget amount. It's up to our legal team and our housing staff whether they need the services, and if they don't need it, we don't hire it. If they think they need it, then we utilize it.
If I may, Madam Mayor, we do have a policy in the City Attorney's Office that when the outside counsel has gotten to 75% of its allotted amount, they have to notify us, and then that way we can consider whether we're going to take it in-house or come back to the council or increase the contract amount. So as far as it relates to Mercy, I anticipate if we got to the point where we anticipate we're going to run out of money, we would come back before you as soon as possible to ensure that that didn't happen.
Well, if I can just kind of clarify, are we paying them on a per-job basis or an hourly basis?
Hourly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we may ask them to do a task, but in the end, we're billed the number of hours that's required. Secondly, any other department in the city were to come back with a $52,000 or any other account with a $52,000 surplus, I think the first thing that they would say is, well, we over-budgeted. We overestimated the amount of money that would take to complete that particular task. I just think there's nothing wrong with keeping a short retainer, a smaller retainer in the kitty at this point. It does no harm. It lets them know that we're seriously scrutinizing every penny of our budgets in the Housing Authority and the Redevelopment Authority. If they need more, I'd be happy to listen, see the work that they've done, and decide to give them more. But I just don't think that we're being consistent with all our other efforts. to reduce our budget and cut costs. I would really think that a $25,000 amount should be enough to at least get us through a few months of work and then see where that takes us.
Okay.
Well, I don't have a question, actually. I just want to say that I'm comfortable with allocating what is left from the prior year's balance to continuing the work. However, I would want a monthly report in terms of the amount that is being used and what it's being used. I think that way we can keep track of what's being used as they're using it, and then if there's any questions and if there's a large bill, then we'll know that something's out of the ordinary. And just the fact that Mr. Zovak made the point that the prior year they didn't use, there was $60,000 left from their account. It's an indication that they are going to do the work that is requested of them, not more, to pad their billing. And question in terms of the balance that is left over, the $60,000. What was the original amount allocated?
I'll look that up for you.
Was about the same 120,000, maybe.
Approximately. For some reason, I want to say 100,000.
Right. So I'm comfortable with allocating it as long as the city attorney's office is keeping a tab on what is being billed and what is being requested. I'm comfortable as long as we don't allocate new monies for this contract. I'm okay with it.
Well,
Mr. Najarian?
I just think we should be better watchdogs of the city's money and pay a very close watch on this. So that's my only point, that we be good watchdogs.
Okay, any other? Mr.
Only
Weaver?
comment is that of $800 million budget, if we're going to worry about this contract, we're going to micromanage like that, we're going to have a lot of long days and nights trying to micromanage everything that is spent in this entire city. In my opinion, I was ready to vote on these.
How much did the
last
Rose
week.
Float need?
Too much for this council to accept.
Well, it was about the same amount, Mr.
I know,
Weaver. So
Mr. Najarian, you come back to this very point every time. Rose float, rose float, rose float. The press writes it, you say it, my colleagues say it, some of it. Hey, let the rose float go to sleep. Let it just go to sleep. I'm not going to micromanage the city.
my only point is that we were looking for an amount, a $50,000 amount would have solved the issue of the Rose Float, not to comment on its worthiness.
The people heard. Believe me, they heard.
Okay, do we have a motion?
Well, we haven't discussed the Kaiser Marston issue.
Well, it's a separate, are they
Well,
separate?
are they two different motions?
They are. You can take them up separately.
Then I'll move the motion for KBB,
Which would be 6A1.
6A1,
Is there a second?
with the condition of bringing back reports on a monthly basis regarding the usage.
Okay, a second?
I'll second it.
Roll call?
Authority members: Friedman,
Yes.
Menuchyan,
Yes.
NC,
Yes.
Najarian,
No.
Parazian,
Yes.
Weaver.
I was ready to vote yes next week. I'll do it again, though I don't like the monthly reporting.
That's a yes?
So that's a yes.
Chair
But it takes
Quintero.
something rather than nothing.
Chair Quintero.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, now we move on to 6.2, which is a professional service agreement with Kaiser Marston.
That motion remains unchanged from the last meeting. The Housing Authority did not take an action on the original motion, so it's been continued. We did provide additional information with regards to KMA and their work in this updated report. Since 2005, KMA has provided economic consulting services on 3 housing development projects. The works included pro forma analysis related to home ownership projects, review and analysis of new market tax credits, some redevelopment, set-aside reuse analysis reports, and looking at some leverage funding sources for the various projects that they were considering. In addition, KMA has provided economic services related to policy areas involving inclusionary zoning, developer due diligence, and housing element and GRA 5-year implementation plans. As we mentioned earlier, the amount of work being provided by Kaiser Marston Associates is on a much smaller scale than the work provided by the Housing Authority's other economic consultant, Tierra West Advisors. And it is a matter of trying to match projects as they're proposed to the strengths of the different consultants. In this particular case, Kaiser Marston Associates has quite a bit of experience with new market tax credits, home ownership projects, resale analysis being conducted on home ownership projects and things along those lines. They have an existing contract with the authority. There's approximately $15,000 available in that contract, and that contract is set to expire on September 30th, 2011.
It's a large firm. Do we actually have the name of the consultant that works with us from Kaiser Marston?
For the development projects, the consultant from Kaiser Marston has been Julie Romey. For some of the policy issue and discussions we've had, we've utilized Kathy Head.
Okay.
This contract is set to expire September 30th, and there's $15,000 left in the balance, correct? So if we don't allocate anything at this point, the contract will continue until September, until it runs out?
Correct.
I would suggest that we continue and have this come back in September, since the contract is not completed yet. And
I'm also
allow
in
last
favor of
year's
that.
allocation of $15,000.
Is there any ramification of doing that?
Of allowing the contract to expire and then coming back?
No. The contract doesn't expire till September.
Correct.
So in September, bring it back, and
There are no immediate ramifications to any of the projects right now by allowing it to continue for the next 3 months and then having that discussion again then. No. We'd bring it back prior to September 30th so we can receive direction.
Would it be the understanding that it could also come back if they're running out of money on that contract, or you want it to?
Well, you can always come back if you're running out of money and you need it at any point in time.
What's the authority's feeling? Is that all right?
I'll
Okay.
make that motion. It's acceptable.
Is there a second to Mr. Mnuchin's motion?
Second?
Roll call?
This is to continue, is this
That it
to-
would come
to
back in
deny or to
September.
continue?
You
To continue
really,
the
actually,
contract
if I
until it
may,
expires.
If I may, Mr. Mnuchin and members of the authority, you actually don't need a motion, because that's going to happen anyway.
Okay.
I move to continue the contract until it expires and bring it back before the expiration, September.
You need a motion for that?
You don't need a motion for that, but if you want to make a
Okay.
motion, that's
We're
fine.
going to
When it runs out.
memorialize it.
Right, okay.
When it runs
That's
out,
fine.
they'll be
That's
back
fine.
to see us.
All right, roll call, please.
Well, if it's a motion, I understand that was made, that I've been told we don't need a motion for. I'll still read the roll call.
That's
So
fine.
desired. Authority members Friedman,
Yes.
Nukian,
Yes.
Incy,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Brazilian,
Yes.
Weaver,
Aye.
Chair Quintero.
Yes.
Thank you.
What's next?
Next is authority member or staff comments.
Staff comments, I hear none.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
We are adjourned.
Stick around.